So guys, now let's take a look at how to account for subsequent expenditure. You acquire an asset for the first time. Let's say you've acquired a house, or let's say you have just acquired, yeah, maybe you've just acquired an equipment. Let's say you have it, and then what happens? You recognize it initially, but let's say after 1 week, after 1 month, you have to improve your asset to make significant improvements to your asset. Now, what you ask yourself is that, should I capitalize these assets or should I expense them? I hope you know that you know what I mean by saying capitalize. By capitalizing an asset, that means you increase that value, you increase that cost on the value of the asset instead of expensing it. Expenditures all involve debit entries, but should I debit the asset or should I debit the expense in the statement of profit or loss? The asset stays in the financial position. So if you capitalize, that means that expenditure is taken directly to the statement of financial position. But if you expense it, that means that expenditure is recognized in the profit or loss. And the statement of profit or loss is for a single period, usually 1 year. So if you see that your expenditure deserves to be consumed over more than 1 year, that means you have to capitalize it. That is, you take it to the statement of profit, to the statement of financial position. So you have to capitalize it. And since I'm speaking of PPE here, capitalizing doesn't necessarily mean that the asset will stay for more than 1 year. But actually, since we're speaking here of PPE, property, plant, and equipment, that means these are tangible, these are non-current assets, and so they stay for more than 1 year. So the subsequent expenditure here. We are told parts of some items of property, plant, and equipment may require replacement at regular intervals. Actually, you have a good example. Let's say when dealing with say airplanes, airplanes there are some parts which have to be removed and then to be replaced. But also you're told here that this cost is recognized in full when it is incurred and added to the carrying amount of the asset. So if you incur that cost, you add it to the carrying amount of the asset. And you are told that it will be depreciated over its expected life, which may be different from the expected life of the other components of the asset. Don't worry, actually, we're just going to see this. We're just going to take a look at this example. Further, you're told the carrying amount of the item being replaced, such as the old furnace lining, is be recognized when the replacement takes place. Don't worry a bit. I'll just take you through this example. So what do we do? How do I know that I have to capitalize this expenditure? As I told you, we capitalize it if it actually improves the asset. Maybe it increases the useful life of the asset. Maybe it increases the performance of the asset, things like that. So here we're told, expenditure incurred in replacing or reviewing a component of an item of plant and equipment must be recognized in the carrying amount of the item. But how? What factors do we consider? The carrying amount of the replaced or renewed component must be recognized. I think you have already spoken about this. And a similar approach is applied when a separate component of PPE is identified in respect of major inspection to enable continued use of an asset. This is the main point here. Normally, if we say we repair an asset, we repair PPE, you usually expense that. But if it's a major repair, it's a repair that enhances the performance of the asset, or maybe it's a repair that enhances actually the useful life of the asset, then we have to capitalize that. So actually, you could say reasons for capitalization. Reasons for capitalization. What could be the reason? Actually, let's say you have made actually a major expenditure. Let's say you have made a major expenditure such that that expenditure, let's say, enhances performance asset performs very greatly, but also let's say increases useful life of the asset. Something like this. You just see that, oh, if it to increase the useful life, that means it should be consumed over more than one period. And so actually I would have to capitalize it. So just like this. So what I need you to do right now is to take a look at an example. So let's go and take a look at an example. Now presume that you have an asset with a carrying amount of, let's say you have a PPE with a carrying amount. You have a PPE with a carrying amount of this figure. Let's say it has a carrying amount of 50 million. This is the carrying amount of your PPE. Now, what do you do further? You got this amount here, but let's say in this amount of PPE, this 50 million, there are two components. Let's say, all right, let me take you one example. Example one. Let me presume two examples. Example one. Example one, what happens? Let's say you have a house and you have decided to make an extension of the building. Extension of the building. You have a building, you have decided to make an extension, to extend it so that I can accommodate maybe more people. Extension of the building, let's say for the cost of, let's say, cost of, let's say what, $10 million, I mean. So initially in the books, you had the building at this cost, $50 million, and then you have made an extension for a cost of $10 million. Let's presume that this building of 50 years had the remaining life of, actually no need to go much further because we're just speaking here of the initial recognition. But let's say you just have 10 million and you see that you have made an extension of the building, so that cost also need to be capitalized. So you have a new carrying amount of what? Of a total of $60 million. And how did we obtain the $60 million? We just took 50 million and then added 10 million, just like this, and all is complete. So this will be the new carrying amount. And then we would have, now actually I haven't spoken about the subsequent measurement, but actually I think from our earlier studies, we know that you would have to depreciate this building over its remaining useful life. Now you have to take this capital, you just take this 10 million, you just take at the useful life it has. Let's say it has a useful life of 5 years, and you use a straight line method, then you have to depreciate it over 5 years. And if the carrying amount had 4 years, then you depreciate it over 4 years. That's what we actually will do. So since right now we are just speaking of the measurement, I won't go that further, but it's no big deal. You can just proceed. Let's say that it had a useful life, remaining useful life of let's say 10 years. And let's say this 10 million has a useful life of, let's say it's just 20 years. Let's presume this. So if this was the case, and let's presume that you did this at the beginning of the year, that means you would have to depreciate this. So what would be the depreciation for the year? Let's just presume for depreciation. I know that we haven't reached here, but even from foundation levels, we know how to compute depreciation. So you start with 50 million. So you take 50 million, less the, I think you know how to compute the depreciation using straight line. So 50 million, less the residual value. Since it's not given, you can just put 0, and then we'll divide by 10 years remaining life. And then we would go to the second part here, which is 10 million, the new capitalized expenditure, and we'll take 10 million, you less 0.2, and you divide by 20. So this is how you arrive at the depreciation. So 50 million over 10 is 5 million, 10 million over 20 is 0.5 million. So 10 million by 0.5 would arrive at $10.5 million. This would be the depreciation for the year. Actually, it's better to have a grasp like this. Now, let's take a look at the last scenario, example 2. Example 2, let's call it example 2. Let's say you're just replacing something, replacing a component. replacement component. Let's say in an aircraft, actually, you have the outer body and you have some inner body that has to be replaced in a much shorter time compared to that outer body. So let's presume that you have an aeroplane with a carrying amount of $4 million, just like this. This is the airplane, $4 million. And let's say that this $4 million actually has got two components. You have external component, an external component of actually $300 million carrying amount, and an internal component of, let's say, $100 million, just like this. Now, let's presume that you are also told that this $100 million has to be replaced. You have to replace it. Maybe it's actually out of date. It can no longer be used. Let's say here it's 350 and here 50. Let's use 50. You have to replace it, this internal component. All right. Let's presume that the cost of replacing, replacing this internal component, let's presume the cost to be how much? Let's say you have to replace it by the cost of $150 million. Let's say this is the cost. So what would we have to do here? We would have to revise our new carrying amount as, right here, new carrying amount. What would you do? It's just easy. Initially, we had the carrying amount of 400 million, right? So first of all, we remove this 50 million and we increase this 150 million because we're recognizing it. So if you remove it from the plane, you'll have to remove 50 million and you'll have to add this 150 million, ending up with 5 million. Yes. So this will be your new amount. So what do? Presume that this carrying amount here, when the plane had this carrying amount, let's say that this internal component had a useful life of, let's say, how much? Let's say it had the remaining useful life of 10 years. Let's presume this. It had a remaining life of 10 years. And actually, this cost of replacing the internal component, let's say the internal component, if not used at all, usually has the useful life of 15 years. So if this is the case, subsequently, you'll have to depreciate. Let's presume that you have just made this replacement at the beginning of the year. So if you did it at the beginning of the year and the year end at the end of the year, actually, you'll have to compute the depreciation. So what would be our depreciation here? So our depreciation would need to be computed as follows. I've remained with this figure here, the external component, that is 350 million. So I would take the new carrying amount, the revised carrying amount, the carrying amount of the internal component, that is 350, then minus scrap value. Let's presume no scrap value, which is 0, and divide by the remaining useful life of 10 years for the internal component. And then I would add here and go to the other part, which is the new part. We no longer have this 50 million. We have replaced this 50 million by the new component, which has a value of 150 million. So I would take 150 million here, actually remove the residual value, presume it to be 0, and then finally I will have to actually divide by the useful life, which is 15 million. And how much would I obtain? How much would I end with? So 350 over 10 is 35 million. 150 over 15 is 15 million. 35 plus, is 10 million. So 35 million plus 10 million would end up with 45 million. And this would be your depreciation. So this is your depreciation. At the end of the year, you'd have to compute the carrying amount. So you have to reduce this 45 million from this 500 here. So that's how actually we go about this. It's just like the same here. If you charge the depreciation, you obtain the carrying amount at the end of the year. Is what? We take this 60 million, which is the new value, and we would have to subtract the depreciation of 10.5 million, ending up with this figure here of 49.5 million. So the same applies here. In case we're in need of computing the carrying amount at the end of the year, this is what we would have done. We would take our new carrying amount, which was 500 million, and we would have to less this depreciation of 45 million, ending up with $455 million. So this is how we do. So if you haven't subscribed, I urge you to subscribe for further videos. Thank you very much, and until next time, bye.